The frozen air of Thornwood's market was sharp enough to cut a soul. Liora Rowan pulled her threadbare cloak tighter, her empty basket a familiar, heavy weight on her arm. They'd refused her coins again, thin coppers with faces worn ghostly smooth. To the town, she was the herb woman, the whisper behind a hand, a woman touched by something they didn't understand. Her daughter, Alara, clung to her skirts, small fingers a knot of warmth in the biting cold. The market was supposed to be a celebration of the first thaw. Instead, a different kind of chill settled in Liora's bones. It started as a sound, a thin, desperate cry that sliced through the merchants' hawking and the crowd's murmur. Not animal, not human, something in between and terrified. "Stay close, my heart," Liora murmured to Alara, but her feet were already moving, drawn by an instinct older than fear. The crowd parted reluctantly, revealing a spectacle of cruelty that stole the breath from her lungs. In a rusted iron cage, so small it could barely turn, was a wolf cub, but this was no forest creature. Its fur held the shimmer of trapped moonlight, and its eyes, they were the blue of winter stars, ancient and intelligent. Fresh blood matted its silver coat where the bars had bitten deep. "Caught it skulking near the shadowed pines," boomed Torvin, the Lord's master huntsman. His scarred face was split by a grin that held no joy. "These moon-touched beasts have been at our herds. Time we sent their kind a message they won't forget." The crowd roared its approval. A rotten apple thudded against the cage. The cub flinched, a whimper escaping its throat that sounded too much like a child's sob. Something in Liora broke. "It's just a baby," she said. The words left her lips, quiet but clear. A stone dropped into a cesspool. The noise died. All eyes turned to her. Torvin's grin widened. "The witch speaks. Defending monsters now, are we, Liora? Perhaps you see a kinship." She felt the heat of their stares, the familiar mixture of suspicion and scorn, but she held her chin high. "I see suffering. That cub has done nothing to you." "Nothing?" Torvin drew a long, wicked knife from his belt. The steel caught the weak sun. "These creatures are a blight. Lord Blackwood's decree is clear. Any silver wolf on our lands is to be eradicated, a lesson for all to see." He raised the blade. This was no swift execution. This was a performance. Liora saw the trajectory, the cruel angle meant for a slow, painful cut. And the cub, those star-blue eyes locked onto hers. In their depths, she didn't see a beast. She saw a child, a lost, terrified child. "No!" Her body moved before her mind could follow. She shoved through the frozen crowd, her boots slipping on the icy cobblestones. She crashed into Torvin's arm as the blade descended. The impact was a jarring crunch of bone and muscle. They fell in a tangle, but not before the knife's edge found its mark. A searing, cold heat bloomed across Liora's ribs. The world dimmed for a second, the roar of the crowd fading to a distant buzz. Warm blood, shockingly hot, began to soak through her dress. "Mama!" Alara's scream was a shard of glass in the sudden silence. Liora gasped, her vision swimming, her hands, slick with her own blood, fumbled for the cage's latch. It was rusted shut. Desperation lent her a terrible strength. With a grinding shriek of metal, the door swung open. The silver cub tumbled out, stumbling on shaky legs. It didn't run. It pressed its small, warm body against her bleeding side, a low, melodic whine vibrating in its throat. "Foolish woman," Torvin spat, scrambling to his feet, his face mottled with rage. "You dare lay hands on the Lord's justice for this abomination?" The crowd was a sea of gaping mouths and pointing fingers. "She's cursed! The witch has shown her true colors!" "Seize her!" Torvin commanded. But the cub lifted its head, its mouth opened, and a sound emerged that was not a howl, but a song. A single, pure, resonant note that seemed to vibrate in the very stones of the square. It was answered. From the deep forest, from the mountains veiled in mist, from the very shadows themselves, came a chorus, a symphony of wild voices that spoke of ancient power and bottomless rage. The air grew thick, charged. The crowd's bravado shattered into raw, primal fear. Torvin paled, his hand tightening on his knife. "What magic have you wrought, witch?" Liora couldn't answer. A deep cold was seeping into her, starting from the cobblestones and climbing into her bones. She was so tired. She managed to curl her arm around the cub, pulling it closer to the fading beat of her heart. "It's all right," she whispered, her gaze finding Alara's tear-streaked face. "Sometimes the right choice has the highest cost." The cub nuzzled her neck, and a gentle warmth spread from the contact, a gentle counterpoint to the icy tide pulling her under. Its blue eyes held hers, and in that moment she didn't hear words, but felt a meaning impress itself on her fading mind. "Thank you, brave heart. You saw me." Darkness nibbled at the edges of her sight. The howling grew closer. Shapes moved at the tree line, massive, graceful shadows that flowed like water. The pack had come. But Liora was sinking. The warmth of the cub against her was the last anchor to the world. As the chaos of fleeing townsfolk swirled around her, as Alara's sobs filled her ears, she floated in a gray place between. She was both lying on the cold ground and standing beside herself, a ghost watching her own death. The wolves formed a silent, shining circle around her body and the cub. They were majestic, terrifying, their eyes glowing with a soft, inner light. And then the circle parted. A man emerged from the forest shadows. No, not a man, something more. He was tall, his presence bending the very light around him. Power rolled off him in silent waves, a pressure that made the air tremble. His hair was dark as a raven's wing, streaked with silver, and his eyes, when they found her dying form, they shifted from storm gray to a luminous, predatory gold. He moved to her side and knelt. The world seemed to hold its breath. His gaze took in the cub, safe and clinging to her, then the terrible wound staining the snow. When he spoke, his voice was the rumble of distant thunder, the crack of ancient ice. "You saved my son's life." The words weren't in the common tongue, yet Liora's spirit understood them perfectly. The cub, this small, precious thing, was a prince, an heir. Large, impossibly warm hands pressed against her wound. A new kind of heat flooded her, not the fire of injury, but the pure, clean radiance of moonlight given form. It was agony. It was ecstasy. Her spirit screamed as this foreign, magnificent power invaded her broken body, stitching flesh and knitting bone with ruthless, divine efficiency. A conversation unfolded around her, not in the air, but in the space between minds. "The wound is mortal. She has lost too much of her essential." This voice was feminine, ancient, and laced with sorrow. "Then we must give her a new one." The thunder voice, the alpha. "She saved the heir of the Moonbound. The old laws are clear. The debt must be paid." "She is human, Kaelen. The change will shatter her." The female voice protested. "Then she dies honored, not abandoned. But wait, I sense something sleeping within her, a power denied, a magic locked away." That immense consciousness, belonging to the alpha named Kaelen, turned its full focus on Liora's flickering spirit. She felt laid bare, examined by a force as old as the mountains. "You are dying, brave one." His voice spoke directly into her soul. "But a path remains, a difficult path. Accept my gift, bond with our kind, and you may rise again, changed. Refuse, and I will grant you a peaceful passing. Your daughter will be under my protection always. She will be Pack, regardless of your choice." The offer hung before her, a door of shimmering light, and one of soft, final shadow. To become something unknown, something other, or to let go and trust this fearsome king with her most precious treasure. She looked at Liora, her little girl weeping over her empty shell. She felt the cub's, the prince's desperate, loving warmth. She thought of a lifetime of being called a witch for the simple gift of healing. There was no choice. I accept. The Alpha's power surged into her, a river of silver fire. But the moment it touched the deepest core of her being, the secret she had guarded since childhood, the curse her grandmother had warned her to hide, it erupted. A golden light, bright as a captive sun, blasted from Liora's body. It met the silver flood, not in conflict, but in a dazzling, harmonious dance. The watching wolves staggered back. Kaelen, the Alpha King, gasped, his mental voice ringing with shock. By the first howl, you are a Sunweaver! You are a Sunweaver! The two magics, Silver Moon and Golden Sun, twined together. Her broken body convulsed on the ground, but now it was not just healing, it was rebuilding. Bones reforged themselves stronger. Blood transformed, singing with new potency. Her hidden magic, a timid stream, roared into a radiant river. Torvin, seeing the spectacle, found a last drag of courage. "Demon! I'll not let this corruption stand!" He raised a crossbow, aimed at Kaelen's back. Liora's eyes snapped open. They blazed with twin lights, gold and silver. She didn't move, only looked at him. A pulse of pure force, visible as a ripple of heated air, shot from her. It lifted Torvin off his feet and hurled him into a market stall, which collapsed around him in a heap of splinters and cloth. She sat up. The wound on her side was gone. Not a scar, not a blemish. Her threadbare dress was still stained with blood, but the skin beneath was whole and new. She drew a deep, shuddering breath, and the world rushed in, not as it was before, but more. She could hear the frantic heartbeat of every creature in the square, smell the iron of blood, the pine of the forest, the sharp tang of fear, and beneath it all, a new sense, a constellation of warm, fierce presences in her mind. The pack. "Mama?" Ilara's voice was tiny, trembling. Liora turned, afraid of what she would see in her daughter's eyes, but Ilara just launched herself forward, small arms locking around Liora's neck in a grip of pure, desperate love. "You're alive!" The silver cub padded over, making a soft chirping sound. Liora could feel its emotions now, a wave of gratitude, joy, and a deep familial bond that had already taken root. Kaelen rose to his full height, and Liora truly saw him. He was beauty forged in wilderness, with a face that belonged to legends and eyes that held eternity. "Arise, Sunweaver," he commanded, his voice now speaking the common tongue with an elegant, ancient accent. "You have walked the edge of death and returned, transformed by the oldest laws. You are now Pack." Liora stood, her movements fluid, powerful. Right. She looked at the cowering remnants of the crowd, at the magnificent wolves, at her daughter, at the prince who was now somehow her own. The winter market was over. Her old life was over. Something new, terrifying, and magnificent had begun. The journey to the Ghostwood was a blur of shadow and sensation. Liora moved in a daze, one hand clasping Ilara's, the other instinctively resting on the head of the silver cub, Kaelen's son, whose name, she learned, was Theron. The pack moved around them like a living river of fur and muscle, silent and swift. Kaelen walked ahead, a pillar of dark and silver, his presence a constant warm pressure against Liora's newly awakened senses. She could feel them all, not just see them, but sense the flicker of their life forces in her mind, a map of glowing embers, the fierce, bright flame of Kaelen, the playful, budding spark of Theron, the steady, warm glow of a massive gray wolf who seemed to be a second in command. It was overwhelming, a symphony of consciousness where before there had been only silence. They did not speak. The forest itself seemed to hush in their passing, the ancient pines of the ghostwood bowing their heads. The air grew colder, purer, and smelled of damp earth, pine resin, and something else, a wild, magic-tinged scent that was the signature of the Moonbound. Just as twilight began to stain the sky deep indigo, they arrived. It was not a castle, nor a village, it was the mountain itself. Hidden behind a waterfall that cascaded like liquid silver in the moonlight was the entrance to the stronghold, a cavern mouth carved with intricate runes that pulsed with a soft blue light. "Welcome to Silverhold," Kaelen said, his voice echoing slightly in the cavern entrance. Inside was not darkness, but a cathedral of stone illuminated by glowing fungi and crystals embedded in the walls. The space opened into a vast central chamber with natural pillars reaching to a ceiling lost in shadow. Passageways spiraled off in all directions, and everywhere were wolves, in their majestic animal forms and in human forms that were just as powerful, moving with an effortless grace. They stopped as one, eyes turning to the newcomers. The weight of their collective gaze was a physical thing. An elderly woman emerged from a side passage. Her hair was a cloud of white, and her eyes were the color of amber. She moved with a healer's quiet certainty. "Kaelen, you found her, or she found you." Her gaze settled on Liora, sharp and assessing. "The transformation has begun, but it is chaotic. The Sunweaver magic is at war with the Moonbound gift. This is Senna, our eldest healer. She will help you find your balance." Senna approached, her scent a mix of dried herbs and cool stone. "Come, child, you are bleeding power like a cracked vessel. It will burn you out from the inside." Liora allowed herself to be led away, Alara and Farron following like twin shadows. They were given a chamber not far from the main hall, a space that was clearly natural cave, but made warm with furs, woven hangings, and a small fire pit. A spring trickled down one wall into a stone basin. "The Alpha's bond has triggered your latent Sunweaver nature, but the two magics are opposites. One is of the moon, of shadow, transformation, and instinct. The other is of the sun, of light, creation, and conscious will. Your body is the battlefield." As if to prove her point, a wave of dizziness hit Liora. Gold light flickered at her fingertips, heating the air. At the same time, a deep ache settled in her bones, a pulling sensation that yearned for the wild, for the shape of the wolf. She stumbled to the fur-covered bed. "Rest," Senna commanded. "The first days are the most dangerous. The bond is fresh, and the Alpha's proximity will either stabilize you or tear you apart faster." She gave Liora a long, unreadable look. "He has not taken a mate in over a century, not since the last Sunweaver was lost. Your presence here, it changes everything." With that ominous statement, she left. Alara curled up beside Liora, her small body trembling. "Mama, are you still me?" Liora pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I will always be your mama, my heart, just a little more now, like how a river is still the river even after a storm has filled it." Theron whined and hopped onto the bed, curling at their feet. His presence was a calming balm, a silver thread of peace in the storm of her soul. Sleep, when it came, was not restful. It was a journey. She dreamed of a magnificent wolf with fur like spun sunlight, running alongside a wolf of solid moonlight. They moved as one, a perfect, powerful pair. Then fire erupted from the ground. Men with iron and hate surrounded them. The golden wolf faltered, her light dimming into something manic, desperate. She turned, not on the hunters, but on her moonlit mate, her fangs now burning with corrupted light. The dream ended with an utter howl of anguish. Liora awoke with a gasp, her skin sheened in cold sweat, her hands glowing fightly. The bond in her chest, the tether to Kaelen, throbbed with a shared echo of that ancient pain. Days blurred into a fragile routine. By day, Senna taught her to ground the Sunweaver magic, to use it for small healings on pack members who came with minor injuries. Liora found she could mend a shallow cut with a touch, the light knitting skin seamlessly. But each use drained her, and the wolf within her would snarl in response, pushing against her control. By night, the wolf spirit grew stronger. Fever racked her body. Her senses would spiral out of control. The sound of a drip of water in a distant tunnel was a thunderclap, the scent of the entire stronghold an overwhelming tapestry. She would dream of running on 4 legs, of the taste of the wind, of the call of the moon. And through it all, she felt him, Kaelen, a constant, simmering presence at the edge of her awareness. Sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, she would wake certain he was just outside her chamber. She'd catch his scent, frost and pine and deep earth, lingering in the air, but he never entered. He fears his presence will accelerate the transformation before you're ready, Theron confided one afternoon, sneaking into her mind with the easy telepathy of the pack. He was in his boy form today, a child of about 10 with tousled dark hair and those startling blue eyes. The last time an alpha bonded with a Sunweaver, it did not end well. The stories say they both went mad. Why does the bond even exist if it is so dangerous? Liora asked wearily. Theron looked at her as if the answer was obvious. Because, when it works, it creates something stronger than anything in this world, a balance. The Moonbound provides strength, stability, a connection to the primal. The Sunweaver brings light, healing, a connection to the creative force. Together, you don't just rule a pack, you could heal realms. The weight of that possibility settled over her, heavier than any fur cloak. One morning, a week after their arrival, panic shattered the stronghold's quiet rhythm. Howls of alarm echoed through the stone passages. Wounded warriors, some in wolf form, some in human, were carried into the great hall. The air filled with the scent of blood and something else, a cloying, bitter odor that made Leora's new senses recoil. She rushed from her chamber, Alara and Theron at her heels. The scene was of controlled chaos. Kaelen stood in the center as a bloodied scout made his report. Lord Blackwood's men have changed tactics. Their arrows and blades are tipped with something new, a poison that burns our healing abilities. It festers, it spreads. Liora moved to the nearest wounded, a young female warrior with a gash across her arm. The wound edges were blackened and veins of sickly purple crawled outward from the wound. The bitter smell was strongest here. Without thinking, Liora reached out. Her healing instinct, her Sunweaver's urge to fix what was broken, took over. Gold light spilled from her palms and enveloped the wound. Agony. It was not her pain, but the poison's. It was a living, malicious darkness that fought her light. She gasped, her teeth clenching, but she pushed harder. The gold light brightened, purifying, burning. The blackened flesh receded, the purple veins faded. With a final sickening sizzle, the wound closed, leaving clean, pink scar tissue. But the effort left her shaking, drained. The wolf within her howled in protest at the strain. "Enough," Kaelen's voice cut through her haze. He was suddenly beside her, his hand on her arm. The contact sent a jolt through the bond, a surge of silver strength that steadied her knees. "You are not a tool to be stent. This poison is meant for us. It could kill you." "There are more," Liora said, her voice ragged. "I can help." "You help by surviving," he said, his gold-flecked eyes boring into hers. For the first time, she saw past the Alpha King to the worry beneath. "Not again. I will not lose another Sunweaver. Not her."
Consciousness returned in fragments. The scent of healing herbs, the soft murmur of Senna's voice, the warm, steady weight of Alara asleep beside her, and the constant, pulsing awareness of him. Kaelen. He was a silver flame in the dark map of her mind, closer than he had been since the first day. Liora opened her eyes. She was in her chamber, weak as a newborn fawn. The light from the wall crystals seemed too bright. Senna was mixing another poultice. "How long?" Leora's voice was a dry rasp. 3 days, Senna said, not looking up. "You pushed too far too fast. The poison was a corruption. Your Sunweaver light purged it, but the fight weakened the barriers between your two natures. The wolf is closer to the surface now." Liora could feel it. A restless energy prowled just beneath her skin, the urge to run, to hunt, to find. "Where is Kaelen?" The question left her lips before she could stop it. Senna gave her a knowing look. "Leading the pack. Blackwood's incursions have grown bolder. The poison was just the beginning." She paused. "He sits outside this door every night. Did you know?" Leora's heart stuttered. "Why?" "Because the bond calls to him as it calls to you, but he fears that completing it, fully claiming you as his mate, will send the final transformation ripping through you before you are strong enough to bear it. His presence is a catalyst, so he stays close enough to guard you, but far enough to hopefully not harm you." The ache in Leora's chest wasn't from the transformation. It was a hollow, yearning thing. She thought of his whispered words as she fell. "Not again." "What happened to the last Sunweaver?" she asked quietly. Senna's face grew solemn, etched with old pain. "Her name was Alara. She was bright and fierce like you. Her bond with Kaelen's father was legendary. But humans from the south, fanatics who saw all magic as an abomination, found a way to corrupt a Sunweaver's light. They poisoned her not with herbs, but with lies and dark artifacts. It twisted her gift. The bond amplified the corruption, and she turned her magnificent power not on the enemy, but inward, on the pack, on her own mate." Senna looked away, her voice dropping. Kaelen was a young man then. He saw it. He had to help his father put down the creature his mother had become. It broke the old alpha. He faded not long after. Kaelen has carried that weight, that fear, ever since. The story was a chilling rain on the embers of Leora's confusion. It explained so much. His distance, his caution, the shadows in his eyes when her magic flared. "I am not her," Liora said, more to herself than to Senna. "No," Senna agreed, "but the potential is the same, for greatness and for tragedy." The days of convalescence that followed were a special kind of torture. Liora was a prisoner of her own volatile body and the Alpha's protective fear. She practiced small magics, learning to weave her light into delicate threads, to mend a cracked cup, to make a dormant seed sprout. Each success was a fleeting joy, tempered by the wolf's impatient stirring. Theron was her constant companion, her guide to pack life. Through him she learned their history, their laws, their connection to the lunar cycles. Alara, resilient as a sapling in the wind, had befriended the pack's other children, both human-born and wolf-born, her laughter now echoing in the stone halls. And every night, Liora lay awake, feeling the silver flame of Kaelen's presence just beyond the door. The bond between them thrummed with unspoken words, with a magnetic pull that was becoming the central gravity of her new world. One afternoon, as Theron showed her the great library, a cave filled with shelves of carved stone tablets and preserved scrolls, a young scout, breathless, found them. "Lady Liora, Ryder approaches the border. Blackwood's banner flies with him, and he has Aldrich the huntsman in his vanguard." A cold dread, colder than any transformation chill, seeped into Leora's veins. Torvin had survived, and he was back. She rushed to the high balcony that overlooked the forest approach. Below, at the edge of the Ghostwood, a contingent of soldiers stood in grim formation. At their head, clad in the obsidian armor of Blackwood's personal guard, was Torvin. His face was a mask of hatred, a long, cruel-looking spear in his hand. And before the pack could fully assemble, a figure emerged from the stronghold entrance. Kaelen. He did not shift. He walked out in human form, a king facing an invading army alone, his power a visible aura that made the air around him shimmer. Leora's bond to him flared, a conduit of pure emotion. She felt his icy rage at the trespass, his calculated focus, and beneath it, a deep, resonant fear, not for himself, but for her, for Theron, for the pack. Torvin's voice, magically amplified, boomed across the clearing. "Beast King, we come under a flag of parley, though you deserve none." "You tread on sacred ground, Hunter," Kaelin's voice replied, calm but carrying to every ear. "Speak your piece and leave." "Lord Blackwood is a merciful lord," Torvin shouted, a lie so blatant it tasted foul. "He offers you a choice. Surrender the witch Liora and the silver cub. Hand them over for divine justice, and he will withdraw. Your pack may continue to skulk in these woods, on his suffrage." A growl rippled through the emerging pack members at Leora's back. "Refuse," Torvin continued, a nasty smile twisting his lips. "We have brought a new gift." He held aloft a large sealed clay urn. "This contains blight spore. We will release it into the headwaters of the Silver Thread River. It will not kill your beasts quickly. It will make the very water they drink rot them from the inside out. A slow, agonizing end for every creature in the Ghostwood. Your choice." Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. The ultimatum hung in the air. Her life and Theron's for the survival of the entire pack. Leora didn't need to feel the pack's fear through the bond to know it. She could see it in the set of their shoulders, hear it in their halted breaths. She looked at Kaelin's back, rod straight, and felt the tempest of conflict within him through the connection. The alpha's duty to protect all his pack, warring with the male's need to protect his mate and his son. The answer came to her with a terrifying clarity. She could not, would not be the cause of their destruction. She turned from the balcony. "Theron," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, "I need you to do something for me, something very brave." The boy's blue eyes met hers, wide but unflinching. "Anything, Mother." The word, now so naturally given and received, gave her strength. "I need you to trust me, no matter what you see, no matter what it looks like is happening. Can you do that?" He nodded, solemn. "Good." I took a deep breath, pulling her Sunweaver light inward, wrapping it around the wild, silver energy of the wolf. She couldn't control the transformation yet, but she could maybe guide its appearance. She focused on the image of strength, of defiance, not of fear. She walked out of the stronghold, past the gathered wolves, and into the clearing to stand beside Kaelen. The look she gave him was one of pure, unadulterated alarm. "What are you doing?" The thought shot down the bond, sharp as an arrow. "Saving our pack," she thought back, hoping the bond would carry her answer. She faced Torvin, lifting her chin just as she had in the market square. "You want me, huntsman, then you shall have me. But the boy stays. He is innocent in all of this." Torvin's grin was triumphant. "The cub is non-negotiable. He is the prize." "Then you shall have neither," Kaelen roared, the sound shaking the trees. He began to shift, his form blurring, growing, silver fur erupting. But Liora placed a hand on his arm. The contact was electric, a surge of gold and silver that crackled between them. She looked into his furious, frightened eyes and poured every ounce of her conviction down the bond. "Trust me." For a heartbeat, she thought he would refuse. Then, with the force of will she could feel grinding through him, he stilled. The shift halted. He remained, a tower of tense muscle beside her, yielding the field to her. Liora turned back to Torvin. "I will come, and the cub will come, but not as your prisoners. We will walk to Lord Blackwood ourselves, under our own power, to hear his terms. Your men will stay here at the border."
The chamber Kaelen led her to was deep within the mountain, far from the main living areas. It was a natural geode, its walls studded with raw amethyst crystals that pulsed with a faint inner light. In the center was a pool of perfectly clear water, fed by a trickle from above, its surface reflecting the violet glow. The air hummed with latent energy. "This is the heart spring," Kaelen said, his voice reverent. "Where the ley lines of the Ghostwood converge. It is a place of pure transformation." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "What I propose is not the full mating bond. That would require the lunar convergence and a complete surrender of both our natures. This is a grafting. I will open my essence to you. You must take a part of my moonbound strength and weave it into the core of your Sunweaver magic. It will hurt. It may not work." Liora swallowed, the reality of it closing in. "What do I need to do?" "Trust me," he said, the same words she had given him in the clearing, "and do not let go, no matter the pain." He stepped into the pool, the water rising to his waist. He held out a hand. Liora took off her outer garments, leaving only a simple shift, and followed. The water was neither warm nor cold. It felt like liquid energy, buzzing against her skin. Facing each other in the center, he took both her hands. His were large, calloused, and warm. "Close your eyes. Find your light, not as a weapon or a tool, but as the core of what you are." Liora obeyed. She reached inward, past the fear, past the wolf's restless pacing, to the quiet, golden sun that had always lived inside her. It glowed, warm and steady. Now, Kaelen's voice was a low murmur, both in her ears and in her mind. "I open the gate." A silver torrent crashed into her consciousness. It was not the gentle warmth of Theron's presence or the distant glow of the pack. This was the raw, untamed power of the Alpha, of the moon itself, ancient, vast, and wild. It was the hunt under a cold star, the patience of stone, the fury of the storm. It threatened to sweep her away, to drown her golden sun in a sea of shadow. "Hold to your light." Kaelen's mental command was a lifeline. "Do not fight it. Weave it." Tears of strain leaked from Leora's closed eyes. It was like trying to braid a sunbeam with a lightning bolt. Her Sunweaver magic flared in panic, pushing back. Agony spiderwebbed through her, a white-hot cracking feeling in her very soul. "I can't," she screamed in her mind. "You must." His presence was there, not forcing, but supporting, a silver wall against which her golden light could brace itself. "You are the bridge, Liora, not the moon, not the sun, the space between, the dawn." The dawn. The image steadied her, not fighting, not surrendering, but merging. She stopped trying to control the silver flood and instead let her golden light flow into it, not to dilute, but to illuminate, to show the moonlight its own beauty. The agony did not vanish, but it changed, became a forge fire. In the shared space of their joined consciousness, she saw it, her golden threads, bright and creative, weaving through his silver strands, strong and enduring. They did not become one color. They became a brilliant, shimmering new pattern, a tapestry of dawn.
In the physical world, the water around them began to glow. Gold and silver light swirled up from their bodies, twisting together, reflecting off the amethyst walls in a dizzying spectacle. The air crackled. And then it was done. The torrent receded, leaving not emptiness, but a new landscape within her. The warring sensations were gone. The Sunweaver magic was still a vibrant, powerful river, but now it ran in banks of cool, solid silver. The wolf spirit was not a separate, caged thing. It was part of the river's current, its strength and instinct now a fundamental part of her flow. She was balanced, whole. She opened her eyes. Kaelen was watching her, his own eyes wide with awe. The bond between them was no longer a tentative thread. It was a cable of braided light, strong, resonant, and alive. She could feel his exhaustion, his relief, his wonder. It worked, he breathed. Liora looked down at their joined hands. Where their skin met, a faint, beautiful tracery of gold and silver swirled like a living tattoo before fading beneath the surface, a permanent mark of their tempered bond. I feel, she started, searching for the word. Solid. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You are. The tempering is complete. You are still transforming, but now the process will be guided, controlled. You are no longer at the mercy of the magics. You are their mistress. The moment of profound connection was shattered by the sound of running feet. Senna appeared at the chamber entrance, her face etched with urgency. Kaelen, Liora, scouts report Blackwood hasn't waited. A smaller force, led by Torvin, is circling through the northern passes. They mean to ambush you on the way to the keep. They never intended to honor the parley. Kaelen's face hardened into the mask of the Alpha King. His warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by lethal calculation. He helped Liora from the pool, their movements now synced with an effortless non-verbal understanding. Then we change the plan, Kaelen said, his voice like grinding stone. They want a surrender? We will give them a war they did not expect. Liora, he turned to her, his gaze intense. The tempering has given you control. Can you use it, not just to heal, but to reshape? She felt the new balance within her, the harmonious power. She thought of the blight spore, of the poison in the wounds. She thought of turning corruption into purity. I believe I can, she said, and for the first time she truly did. Good. A fierce, proud light sparked in his eyes. Let us go and show Lord Blackwood what happens when he threatens a Sunweaver of the Moonbound pack. He strode from the chamber, a king going to battle, and Liora followed, not as a burden to be protected, but as a power in her own right. The girl from the winter market was gone. In her place stood the Dawnweaver, and she was ready to meet the coming darkness.
They moved through the ghostwood like twin shadows, Kaelen in his magnificent wolf form, a creature of storm cloud gray and silver so large his shoulder brushed Leora's waist, and Liora herself, running with a speed and silence that was no longer human. The tempered bond was a conduit of shared strength. She felt the terrain through his senses, his predatory focus sharpening her own. The pack flowed around them, a disciplined, silent army of fur and tooth. Senna's words echoed in Leora's mind. Ambush. Torvin was not a man of patience. The humiliation in the market, her defiance at the border, it had festered. He would want his vengeance personal and immediate, before Lord Blackwood could claim his prizes. Kaelen's thoughts brushed hers, cool and strategic. The northern pass narrows at the stone throat. High walls, one way through, perfect for an ambush. They will have archers on the ridges. Can we go around? Liora sent back. Too long. The moon waits for no one. A flicker of grim amusement. Besides, I have no intention of hiding from this hunter. They approached the base of the pass as the last daylight bled from the sky. The stone throat was aptly named, a sheer canyon of black rock, the path through it little more than a fissure. The air grew still, heavy with the promise of violence. Kaelen halted, raising his muzzle. Liora stilled beside him, opening her new senses. She could hear it now, the faint creak of leather, the suppressed breath of men hiding above, the metallic scent of oiled steel. Her heart hammered, but not with fear, with a fierce, focused energy. The wolf within paced, not in panic, but in readiness. 20, maybe 30, Kaelen assessed. Archers above, swordsmen hidden in the rocks at the canyon mouth. They mean to funnel us in and pick us off. A plan formed between them, not in words, but in shared intuition. Liora looked at her hands, where the ghost of the gold-silver traceries seemed to pulse. She could feel her Sunweaver light, stable now, coiled like a spring. She thought not of healing, but of illumination. On my signal, Kaelen's thought was a blade being drawn. You light the sky, we will darken the earth. He gave a soft, almost inaudible chuff. The pack melted into the deepening shadows of the tree line, becoming invisible. Liora took a deep breath, centering herself on the balanced core of her power. She stepped out from the trees, into the open ground before the stone throat, a single, obvious target. For a moment, nothing. Then a shout from above. There, the witch, alone! Torvin's voice, thick with triumph, rang out. Foolish creature, fire! A volley of arrows hissed down from the ridges, black streaks against the twilight. Liora didn't flinch. She raised her hands, palms to the sky, and released her power. It was not a shield, it was a second sun. A sphere of golden white light erupted from her, blinding in its intensity. It shot upward and then burst, flooding the narrow canyon with the brilliance of high noon. The archers on the ridges screamed, clutching at their seared eyes. The arrows meant for her veered wildly, clattering harmlessly against the rocks. In that moment of stunning, painful light, the shadows at the canyon mouth moved. Kaelen and the pack struck. They were not wolves, but blurs of vengeance. They emerged from the very darkness Liora had banished, hitting the concealed swordsmen before they could recover their sight. Snarls, shouts, and the terrible sounds of conflict filled the air. Liora held the light, pouring her will into it. It was a massive drain, but the tempered bond fed her, Kaelen's relentless strength a wellspring she could draw upon. She saw him then, a myth made flesh, tearing through Blackwood's men. He was grace and slaughter intertwined. Torvin, shielded behind a rock, bellowed in rage. He had a crossbow, larger than any she'd seen, and it was leveled not at the wolves, but at her. The bolt was tipped with a vial of that same sickly purple poison. "Witch!" he roared, and fired. Time seemed to slow. Liora saw the bolt spiral toward her, a pinpoint of death amidst her own brilliant light. Instinct screamed to dodge, but a deeper knowledge, born of the tempering, held her steady. She shifted the light, focusing it into a beam as precise as a needle. The golden lance struck the vial at the bolt's tip. There was no explosion. The poison, the corrupted blight spore essence, met the pure creative force of a Sunweaver's power. It unmade. The purple sludge dissipated into harmless, shimmering mist that smelled suddenly of rainwater and clean earth. The bolt itself, now just wood and steel, thudded into the ground at her feet. Torvin stared, his face a mask of utter disbelief. His weapon of ultimate cruelty had been rendered inert by a glow. That hesitation cost him. A silver-gray shape launched from a nearby rock, Kaelen in mid-leap, shifting. He landed before Torvin not as a wolf, but as the Alpha King, one hand closing around the huntsman's throat and lifting him off the ground. The remaining soldiers, seeing their leader captured and their ambush a catastrophic failure, broke and fled into the forest. The brilliant light winked out. Liora swayed, the exhaustion hitting her now. The canyon was plunged back into twilight, only lit by the rising moon and the eerie glow of wolf eyes. It was littered with fallen men, some dead, many unconscious or wounded. Kaelen held the choking Torvin aloft, his golden eyes burning with cold fire. "You threaten my mate, you poison my lands, you dare." His voice was low, more terrifying than any shout. "Kaelen," Liora said, her voice rough. She walked forward, her legs trembling. "Don't." He looked at her, the fury in his gaze softening a fraction. "He does not deserve mercy." "Mercy isn't for him," she said, stopping before them. She looked at Torvin's purpling face, his bulging eyes filled with hate and terror. "It's for us. Killing him in cold blood, that's his way, not ours." She placed a hand on Kaelen's arm. Through the bond, she sent not a command, but a feeling, the memory of the balanced light in the heartspring, of the dawn they had forged together. Kaelen's jaw tightened. Then, with a snarl of disgust, he threw Torvin to the ground. The huntsman gasped, clawing at his throat. "Look at her," his voice rolling over the fallen man. "Look at the woman whose life you valued less than a wolf cub's, the woman who just spared yours." Torvin's hate-filled eyes flicked to Liora. There was no gratitude there, only a deeper, more impotent rage. "You will carry a message to your lord," Kaelen said, his voice rolling over the fallen man. "The Moonbound pack is not hiding, we are waiting. The next time he sends men into our woods, we will not stop at the border. We will bring the war to his gates, and we will bring our Sunweaver." He leaned down, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Now, run." Torvin scrambled to his feet, stumbling, and fled into the darkness after his men, the sound of his frantic footsteps fading quickly. Silence returned to the stone throat, broken only by the moans of the wounded. Liora turned to survey the aftermath, her healer's heart clenching. "We need to help them." Senna and other pack healers were already moving among the fallen, both pack and human. Liora joined them, her tempered magic flowing easily now. She healed a deep gash on a young wolf's flank, the light sealing it without struggle. She moved to a human soldier with a broken leg, her touch bringing not just healing, but a calming warmth that eased his pained whimpers. As she worked, she felt Kaelen's gaze on her. She looked up. He stood amidst the evidence of his power, but he was watching her, his expression inscrutable. Through the bond, she felt a complex whirl of pride, residual anger, a fierce protectiveness, and something else, warmer and more profound, that he quickly shielded. One of the human soldiers, an older man with a grizzled beard who Liora had just healed, looked from her to Kaelen with dawning horror. You're not a witch, you're something else. And you," he looked at Kaelen, "you're not just beasts." "No," Kaelen said, his voice carrying to all. "We are the guardians this land forgot it needed. Remember that, and tell your comrades." The journey back to Silverhold was solemn but victorious. The pack had suffered minor injuries, no losses. The threat was pushed back, and a message sent. But Liora knew it was only a reprieve. Blackwood would not take this lightly. Back in her chamber, exhaustion claimed her. Alera was already asleep, curled with Theron in his wolf cub form. Liora sank onto her bed, her body humming with spent power and the lingering adrenaline of battle. She didn't hear him enter, but she felt him. Kaelen stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall's crystal light. He had washed the battle from himself, but the intensity remained. The Zenith Moon hung over Silverhold like a great silver eye. In the central chamber, the pack had gathered, a sea of expectant faces turned toward the stone dais where Kaelen and Liora stood. Theron and Alara stood just below them, a united front. The tempering had been explained, the battle at the stone throat recounted. A new, fragile hope vibrated in the air.
But Liora felt the tension thrumming through the bond from Kaelen. The moon's peak was a time of power for the Moonbound, but also a deadline. Blackwood's ultimatum had expired. A scout, still in wolf form, dashed into the hall, shifting as he skidded to a stop. "Alpha! Riders approach from the southeast, not Blackwood's colors, a white banner with a golden tree." Kaelen's brows drew together. The Sylvan marches? What business would Illyrin have with us now? Before he could ponder further, another scout arrived from the western tunnel. "Movement at the shadowed pine border. Blackwood's full army mobilizes. They carry siege engines." A cold dread settled in the pit of Liora's stomach. An army from one direction, an unknown emissary from another. They were being encircled. "Prepare the defenses," Kaelen ordered, his voice cutting through the rising murmur. "But hold any attack. Let us first see what the Lord of the Sylvan Marches wants." They met the riders at the edge of the Ghostwood, under the cold, brilliant moon. The man who dismounted from a white stallion was unlike any lord Liora had seen. He was tall and slender, dressed in greens and browns that seemed to blend with the forest, his hair the color of pale birch bark. His eyes were a startling, clear green. He carried no obvious weapon, but power radiated from him, an earthy, growing, ancient magic. "Kaelen, Alpha of the Moonbound," the man said, his voice like wind through leaves. "I am Illyrin, keeper of the Sylvan Marches. I come at a dire time, I see." His gaze swept over the gathered wolves, then settled on Liora. His green eyes widened slightly. "And I see the rumors are true. A Sunweaver walks again." "What is your business, keeper?" Kaelen asked, his tone guarded but not hostile. "A warning and an offer," Illyrin said. "Lord Blackwood has not been idle. He has not only crafted poisons for your kind, he has dug deep into forbidden places. He has found a relic of the old world, the Shadow Stone." A collective shiver went through the pack. Even Kaelen stiffened. "A myth," Senna whispered from behind Liora. "A truth," Illyrin corrected gently. "A stone that drinks light and life. He means to use it not just against you, but to blight the very land, to suck the magic from the Ghostwood and the Marches, rendering it a barren waste where only his iron rule can hold sway. My people are rooted to the land. We cannot flee. We must fight. But we cannot fight this shadow alone." He looked directly at Liora. His green eyes widened slightly. "The Shadowstone's power is anti-creation. It is the absolute opposite of what you are, Sunweaver. Only a light of pure creation can counter it. But to wield such light, you would need to be complete. Your bond must be whole." Kaelen's hand found Liora's, his grip tight. "The full bond is too risky. The history is written by those who failed," Illyrin interrupted, not unkindly. "I have brought something from the deepest archives of the Marches." He gestured to an attendant who brought forth a long, narrow case of living wood. Inside, on a bed of velvet moss, lay a single perfect feather. It glowed with a soft, internal light, shifting in color from dawn pink to midday gold. "This is a phoenix pinion. It is a focus, a stabilizer. In the moment of the bonding convergence, it can act as a regulator, absorbing the initial surge of power and metering it out, allowing the union to settle safely. It is a one-time chance." Hope, terrifying and bright, flared in Liora's chest. She looked at Kaelen. His face was a battle of fear and desperate need. "Why?" Kaelen asked, his voice rough. "Why risk such a treasure for us?" Illyrin's serene face grew grim. "Because if Blackwood succeeds with the Shadowstone, the Marches die, the Ghostwood dies. Then his hunger will turn elsewhere. He seeks to unmake all magic, all that is wild and free. Your pack and my people are the first bulwarks. Together, with a complete Alpha and Sunweaver, we stand a chance. Divided, we fall." The truth of it hung in the moonlit air. This was no longer just about survival. It was about the fate of every magical being in the realm. From the west, the low, ominous thud of a war drum began to echo through the trees. Blackwood's army was on the move. Kaelen turned to Liora. In the bond, she felt his walls crumble. She felt his centuries of solitude, the burden of leadership, his fear of repeating history, and beneath it all, a love for his pack and his land so vast it was an ocean. And she felt his love for her, not just as a Sunweaver, but as Liora, brave, stubborn, compassionate Liora. The choice is yours, his thought came, laid bare before her. I will follow you into fire or peace, but know this, I want the bond. I have wanted it since I saw your light in the snow. I am simply afraid. His honesty undid her. She cupped his face in her hands, ignoring the gasps around them. I'm afraid too, she whispered, but I am more afraid of a world where Blackwood wins, of a world where we never try. She looked at the phoenix pinion, glowing in its case. We are not our history, Kaelen. We are our choice, right now. She saw the decision solidify in his eyes. The fear was gone, but it was conquered. He nodded once. We will do it, Kaelen announced to the Illyrian in the pack. Now, at the Heartspring, under the Zenith Moon. There was no time for ceremony or doubt. The war drums grew louder. In the glowing geode, with the pack and Illyrian's attendants forming a protective circle, Kaelen and Liora stood once more in the pool. The phoenix pinion lay on the water between them, floating as if on an invisible cushion, its gentle light intertwined with the amethyst glow. The process will be intense, Illyrian said from the edge. The pinion will guide the merge, but you must both surrender to it completely, hold nothing back. Kaelen took Liora's hands. This time there was no hesitation. His gaze was full of a fierce and unwavering commitment. I am yours, Liora Rowan, my strength, my soul, my forever. Tears welled in her eyes. And I am yours, Kaelen of the Moonbound, my light, my heart, my always. Together they reached for the phoenix pinion. The moment their fingers touched the glowing feather, the world dissolved. It was not the controlled, deliberate weaving of the tempering. This was a supernova. Their souls did not merge, they collided. Every memory, every hope, every fear, every joy exploded between them. She was a child collecting herbs with her grandmother. He was a pup learning to hunt under his father's watchful eye. She felt the sting of every townsperson's slur. He bore the weight of his father's grief after his mother's fall. She knew the overwhelming love of holding Alara for the first time. He felt the fierce protectiveness for Theron, his miracle child. The flood was boundless, overwhelming. She felt his centuries of solitude, the crushing duty. She felt his years of hiding, the quiet strength. The pain was exquisite, the joy unbearable. Through the maelstrom, the phoenix pinion burned. It was a brilliant, calming core at the center of the storm, a spindle around which their two ranging energies could wind. It absorbed the violent initial shock, the power that had shattered their parents, and began to feed it back to them in a steady, golden-silver stream. The union was not a loss of self, but an expansion. She was still Liora, but now she held the mountains in her bones. He was still Kaelen, but now he carried a sun in his chest. In the physical world, their bodies glowed, becoming almost translucent. The gold and silver light from them filled the heartspring, then shot upward through a natural chimney in the geode ceiling, a pillar of radiant power visible for miles, piercing the night sky. Outside, the pack and the Sylvan folk watched in awe. The advancing army of Blackwood, seen through the trees, halted, men pointing and shouting at the sudden, impossible dawn erupting from the mountain. And then, as the Zenith Moon began its slow descent, the light receded, flowing back into the two figures in the pool. Liora opened her eyes. She saw the world through a dual lens. Every leaf held its intricate sunlit detail and also its shadowy moonlit essence. She felt the heartbeat of every creature in the Ghostwood, the slow pulse of the stones, the whisper of the roots in the earth. And she felt Kaelen, not just beside her, but within her, a perfect, resonant harmony. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw her own reflection, crowned in light. He smiled, a true, unrestrained smile that transformed his fierce face. "Dawnweaver," he breathed. The bond was complete. They were one.
A howl of pure, triumphant joy erupted from the pack, taken up by every throat, a song that shook the mountains. Illyrin smiled, a tear traced a path down his cheek. It is done. But the celebration was cut short by a runner. The army advances. They've seen the light. They're charging. Kaelen and Liora stepped from the heartspring, hand in hand. They were dressed in simple garments, but they wore their power like royalty. The uncertainty was gone. The fear was gone. Then let us greet them, Kaelen said.
The united force that gathered at the Ghostwood's edge was unlike any seen in living memory. Moonbound wolves stood shoulder to shoulder with the Sylvan folk, warriors whose skin bore the texture of bark, whose hair was twined with leaves, and who wielded bows of living wood. At their head stood Kaelen and Liora, a living emblem of the union they represented. The completed bond hummed between them, a constant, reassuring song of power and presence. From the west, the forest trembled with the approach of Blackwood's legion. The thud of drums was now a constant, oppressive heartbeat. Through their shared senses, Liora and Kaelen could feel the wrongness of it, a blight of iron, fear, and the chilling, hollow hunger of the Shadowstone. It felt like a void approaching, a tear in the world's fabric. "They will try to break us with fear before steel," Kaelen said, his voice carrying to all. "Hold to your connection, to the pack, to the land. This forest fights with us." Aileron raised a hand, and the earth at the tree line began to shift. Thorny vines, thick as a man's arm, wove themselves into a living palisade. Trees leaned in, their branches forming a snarled canopy. The Ghostwood was preparing its own defense. The first wave of Blackwood's army appeared through the mist, a line of pikemen and crossbowmen, their armor dull black. Behind them, rolling on great wheels, came the siege engines, and on a command platform drawn by 4 destriers stood Lord Blackwood himself. He was a man carved from cold ambition, his face sharp, his eyes the color of flint. In his hands he held a box of black iron. He raised a hand, and the drums stopped. The silence was more terrifying. "Beasts and tree sprites, you parade your abominations under a stolen sun, but I bring the true order. I bring the void that consumes chaos." He opened the iron box. Darkness poured out, not the gentle dark of night, but an absolute light-eating negation. It was silent and cold, spreading from the box like spilled ink, killing the grass where it touched, turning vibrant leaves to brittle ash. The Shadowstone's power. It began to crawl toward the fortified tree line, and where it passed, the Sylvan magic faltered, the thorns withered, the branches recoiled. A wave of dread, physical and sickening, rolled over the allied line. Men and wolves alike whimpered, instinct screaming to flee the unnatural emptiness. Liora felt it like a vacuum in her soul, trying to suck the light from her very core. She staggered, but Kaelen's hand was in hers, an anchor of solid, silver strength. "It is the opposite of you," his thought came, steady, "so give it what it cannot consume." She understood. The Shadowstone fed on magic, on life, on light. To fight it with a blast of power would only fuel it. She had to be not a weapon, but a source. Liora let go of Kaelen's hand and stepped forward, through the living gate, to stand alone between the dying forest and the advancing shadow. She closed her eyes, shutting out the fear, the impending doom. She sank into the completed bond, into the perfect dawn within her.
She found the core of her Sunweaver magic not as a force to be directed, but as a state of being. She began to glow. It was a gentle light at first, a soft gold that emanated from her skin. Then it grew, brighter and purer, until she was the heart of a miniature star. She didn't push the light outward against the shadow. She simply was light, an immutable fact. The crawling void reached her and stopped. It lapped at the edges of her radiance like a black wave against a lighthouse, unable to advance. A hissing, silent scream seemed to emanate from the darkness itself. It tried to engulf her, to snuff her out, but her light was not an attack, it was an existence. The shadow could not consume a sun. "What is this?" Blackwood's voice was tinged with the first note of uncertainty. Liora opened her eyes. They were pure, molten gold. She took a step forward. The shadow retreated before her, shrinking back from the vivifying light. Where her feet touched the blighted earth, green shoots pushed through the ash. "Your void has no power here," she said, and her voice was the sound of a spring thaw, of a seed breaking stone. "This land is alive, and I am its dawn." Behind her, emboldened, the Sylvan magic surged. The withered thorns regrew, thicker and sharper. The trees straightened, their leaves flushing with renewed vigor. A chorus of holes rose from the pack, not of rage, but of soaring hope. Blackwood's face contorted with fury. "Then perish with it! Loose everything!" A hail of crossbow bolts, followed by flaming pitch from the siege engines, arced over the shadow-stalled front line, aimed directly at Liora and the tree line. Kaelen moved. A silver streak, he was suddenly before her, not to shield her, but to stand with her. He raised his hands, and a wall of shimmering silver energy, like moonlight made solid, erupted before them. The bolts shattered against it. The flaming pitch hit and guttered out, unable to burn the cold celestial power. The bond sang between them, her light, his moon, her creation, his protection. They were two halves of a perfect whole. Aileron gave a signal. From the branches 100 sylvan arrows flew, silent and true. They found joints in armor, exposed faces. Blackwood's front line wavered. "Now!" Kaelen's command was a roar felt in the chest. The pack and the Sylvan warriors poured from the tree line. It was not a chaotic charge, but a coordinated dance of tooth, claw, and living wood. Wolves moved in pairs, one distracting while the other hamstrung a soldier. Sylvan warriors used the terrain, the very roots tripping foes, vines snatching weapons. Liora and Kaelen advanced through the fray, a bastion of calm power. Liora's light healed wounded allies with a glance, searing the edges of wounds closed. Kaelen's presence broke enemy formations, his mere gaze sowing paralyzing fear. They moved inexorably toward the command platform. Blackwood, seeing his shadow failing and his lines crumbling, snatched the shadow stone from its box. The raw, uncontained void pulsed in his hand, a hole in the world. The soldiers near him cried out as their vitality was visibly sapped, their hair turning white, their skin wrinkling. "You want light, witch? Drown in darkness!" Blackwood screamed, his own face gaunt with the stone's drain. He hurled the shadow stone, not at Liora, but at the ground between them. It struck the earth and activated fully. A sphere of pure negation exploded outward. It didn't just kill, it unmade. Grass, soil, rock simply ceased to exist, replaced by a flat, gray nothingness. The sphere expanded rapidly, heading straight for Liora and Kaelen. There was no time for thought. Instinct, born of the complete bond, took over. They didn't raise a shield, they joined hands. Liora poured every ounce of her Sunweaver essence, the joy of Alara's laugh, the warmth of her first healed herb, the fierce love for her new pack. Kaelen met it with the strength of the mountains, the endurance of the moon's cycles, the deep, abiding loyalty for his people. Their combined power did not clash with the void, it filled it. Where the expanding sphere of nothingness met the radiance of their joined spirits, a miracle occurred. The gray void began to color, faint gold at the edges, then streaked with silver. It slowed, stopped, and then reversed. The nothingness became something. Wildflowers of impossible hues burst from the gray nothingness. Crystal formations, glowing with soft light, sprouted from the ground. A small, perfect tree, its leaves half gold, half silver, grew.
Peace, Liora discovered, was not the absence of conflict, but a different kind of work. The weeks following Blackwood's defeat were a whirlwind of healing, rebuilding, and diplomacy. The Dawn Grove became a pilgrimage site, not just for the Pack and Sylvan folk, but for hesitant humans from the surrounding villages, drawn by tales of the miracle. Liora and Kaelen held court there often, seated on stones that had grown naturally into thrones of intertwined root and crystal. She healed the sick who came, her touch now so refined it could mend a withered lung or calm a frenzied mind. Kaelen mediated disputes, his word law, but a law tempered by the mercy Liora's presence inspired. The bond between them was a constant, quiet wonder. They could converse across Silverhold without speaking. A shared glance could convey a chapter's worth of thought. At night, their dreams intertwined, sometimes revisiting memories, sometimes walking in landscapes of pure, shared imagination. Yet, within the deep contentment, a new sensation began to itch at the edges of Liora's awareness. It started subtly, a faint tremor in the bond that had nothing to do with Kaelen, a feeling that the earth itself was sighing. At first, she thought it was her imagination or the aftershocks of the massive magic unleashed during the battle, but it persisted. During a healing session with an elderly farmer whose bones ached before the rain, she placed her hands on his shoulders and felt it stronger, a deep, resonant ache that was not the man's, but the land's. "Does the soil feel different to you, my lord?" she asked the old man quietly. The old man nodded, his eyes cloudy with more than age. "Aye, Lady Dawn. The Westfield, it's not taking seed. The earth feels tired, hollow-like." Later, in their chambers, she mentioned it to Kaelen. He frowned, stretching his senses through his own connection to the territory. "I feel a dissonance from the west, near the Blight Scar." The Blight Scar was the name given to the vast, barren valley where Blackwood's ancestors had waged a different war centuries ago, using fire and salt to drive out the original creatures of the land. It was a place the Pack avoided, a wound on the territory that had never healed. The battle with the Shadowstone was there, Kaelen mused. Perhaps we did not purify as deeply as we thought. Perhaps the void left was a weakness. The next morning their unease was given voice. Ellerin arrived, his usual serene demeanor replaced by sharp concern. The mycorrhizal network, the root system that connects the life of the marches, is reporting a sickness. It is spreading from a point in your territory, a numbness, a silence where there should be song. A council was called. Senna, her face grave, brought out ancient stone tablets. The Blight Scar was not just made by salt and fire. The old texts call it the place where the earth spirits slept. The war wounded it, drove it into a deep slumber. Blackwood's Shadowstone, it may have agitated the old wound, or worse, tapped into it. An earth spirit? Asked Liora. A being of pure telluric energy, Ellerin explained, older than wolves or trees, the consciousness of the land itself in a region. If it is wounded and dreaming fitfully, its nightmares could be seeping out, causing the earth to sicken. Can it be awakened, healed? Asked Kaelen. Senna and Ellerin exchanged a wary look. To wake a wounded titan is dangerous, Senna said. Its pain could manifest as earthquakes, as volcanoes. Its confusion could twist the very geography. But if it sleeps in pain, the land will continue to die, Liora said, feeling the truth of it in her bones. The sighing earth was a cry for help. I am a healer. How can I ignore this? It is not a creature of blood and bone, Liora, Kaelen said, his worry for her coloring the bond. Its wounds are of essence, of spirit. Your light might not be enough, or it might be too much. There is a way, Ellerin said slowly, a ritual of deep communion. The Sylvan have songs to gently greet such spirits, and you, Dawnweaver, have the light to perhaps soothe its pain. But you would have to journey to the heart of the Blightscar, to the spirit's resting place, and descend into a dream not your own. It is a risk of the soul. The proposal hung in the air. The peace they had fought so hard for was fragile. Delving into the dreams of a wounded land could shatter it. Yet the soft, persistent ache in the bond, the land's lament, grew stronger by the day. Liora saw the concern in Kaelen's eyes, the protector warring with the king who knew his duty to the territory. We will go, Liora said, placing her hand over his. Not just me, us. The bond is our strength. If this spirit is of the land, then you, as Alpha, are connected to it as surely as I am. We face its dreams together. Kaelen searched her face, then nodded, the decision settling. Together. Preparations were made not for war, but for a journey inward. Ellerin taught them the greeting song, a series of low, resonant notes that spoke of root and rock, of patience and time. Senna prepared tonics to anchor their spirits to their bodies. They left Theron and Alara with her in her care, with the entire pack as their guard. The journey to the Blightscar was grim. The vibrant life of the Ghostwood faded into scrub, then into cracked gray earth. The air grew still and thick. In the center of the vast valley was a single, massive outcropping of black rock, like a scab on the world. At its base was a cave mouth exhaling air that was neither warm nor cold, but empty. This was the place. Standing before the dark entrance, the greeting song heavy on their lips, Liora felt a tremor of true fear. This was not an enemy to fight, it was a sickness to share. Kaelen took her hand, his grip firm. Always, his thought whispered in her mind. Always, she echoed. They began to sing. The notes were awkward at first, human and wolf voices trying to mimic the slow language of stone. But as they sang, the bond between them harmonized, weaving their voices into one perfect resonant tone. The sound did not echo in the cave, it was absorbed, drinking in. As they sang, they walked forward into the darkness. The physical cave was shallow, ending in a wall of smooth rock. But as their song hit the wall, the stone became mist, and they passed through. They stood in a landscape of dream. It was the Blightscar, but as seen through a fever glass. The sky was a bruised purple, the cracked earth pulsed like an infected wound. In the distance, the black rock outcropping was a giant twisted form, the sleeping earth spirit. It was not a humanoid form, but a vast conglomerate being of stone, crystal, and fossilized roots, and it was tethered by hundreds of ethereal black chains, the legacy of the ancient war, the scars of poison and fire. With every labored breath the spirit took, the Dreamland shuddered. Each exhale spread a gray numbness across the ground. The greeting song faltered in Liora's throat. The scale of the suffering was overwhelming. This wasn't a wound, it was an eternity of torture. Kaelen's song deepened, becoming a steady, grounding hum. Show it, he urged through the bond. "Show it what it has forgotten." Liora drew on her light, but instead of projecting it, she let it bloom within her, making herself a vessel of pure, gentle dawn. She became a walking memory of sun on leaves, of rain on thirsty soil, of a sapling cracking open in the dark. She walked toward the Titan. The black chains rattled, sensing before in presence. The spirit groaned in its sleep, a sound that made the dream rock crack. "We are not your enemies," Liora spoke, her voice amplified by her light and Kaelen's support. "We are the children of your waking world. We come to sing your pain and to remind you of green." She drew out, not touching the spirit, but extending her light to one of the smaller, lesser chains near its base. The chain, a construct of forgotten hatred and salt, hissed as her light touched it. For a moment it resisted, then, with a sound like snapping crystal, it dissolved into motes of black dust. The spirit shuddered, and for a terrifying second, a single massive eye of molten stone cracked open, fixing on her. The gaze held eons of confusion and agony. Liora did not look away. She poured her compassion, her understanding of suffering and healing into her light. She showed it images, not from her mind, but from the bond with the land itself. The dawn grove blooming, the ghostwood thriving, a sapling breaking through cracked soil. The eye blinked slowly. The agony in it lessened, just a fraction, replaced by a glimmer of recognition. "It is working," Kaelen's thought was taut with strain. But the larger chains, they're anchored in its core. To break those, you would have to enter its dream fully, share its memories of the wounding. It was the deepest risk. To be submerged in the spirit's ancient catastrophic pain could drown her own consciousness forever. Liora looked back at Kaelen, his form a steady silhouette in silver in the bruised dreamlight. The bond between them was a lifeline, strong and true. "Hold the song," she said. "Hold me." She turned back to the spirit, took a final breath, and stepped forward, letting her... It was not a linear memory. It was sensation, emotion, and image fused into an overwhelming torrent. Liora was the rich, deep soil, teeming with countless tiny lives. She was the patient bedrock, cradling secret rivers. She was the slow, joyous stretching of a mountain range over millennia. Then came the others. First, the gentle tread of the early ones, creatures of leaf and light, of fur and song. They were part of the tapestry. Their lives were brief, bright threads in her long, slow story. She welcomed them. Then new threads, harder, sharper, human threads. At first, they were no different, builders of simple homes, whisperers to plants. But their thread changed. It grew dense with want, with a frantic need to own the tapestry, not be part of it. The memory focused. Fire. Not wildfire, but directed, hateful fire that sought to burn her skin clean of the other threads. Salt poured into her open wounds to prevent the old threads from regrowing. She felt the death of entire forests, the silencing of species, as a localized screaming agony. The earth spirit recoiled, not in malice, but in a pain so profound it sought oblivion. It began to pull its consciousness inward, away from the wounded surface, to sleep and forget. But sleep brought no peace. The wound festered in the dark. The memory of the salt and fire crystallized into the black chains of the dream, the spirit's own subconscious manifestation of its trauma. And then, a new violation, a recent, sharp sting. The shadow stone's void. It was a needle of absolute negation plunged into the old, numb scar. It didn't just hurt. It threatened to unravel the spirit's very essence, to turn the deep sleep into true death. This was the source of the land's sickness. The spirit was trapped in a nightmare, reliving its ancient wounding, while a new poison seeped into the dream.
Liora, a speck of conscious light in this vast, pained memory, knew she could not break the chains herself. They were part of the spirit now, but she could show it that the world above had changed. She poured her own memories into the stream, not as an assault, but as an offering. The feel of Kaelen's hand in hers, Ilara's laughter, Theron's trusting blue eyes, the solidarity of the pack, the respect of the Sylvan, the healed farmer's gratitude, the Dawn Grove, a place where life defiantly, beautifully created something new from nothing. She showed it the balance she and Kaelen represented, the union of nurturing sun and protective moon, of creation and preservation. "The ones who hurt you are gone," she sang with her soul voice. "Their heirs choose differently. We choose to heal. Let us help you. You do not have to carry this pain alone." For an eternity that lasted seconds, there was no response, only the vast grinding agony of the memory. Then a shift, a single clear note in the cacophony of pain. Curiosity, a longing for the green images she had shown. The spirit's will, dormant for centuries, stirred. It was feeble, but it was there. It turned its attention from the pain of the chains to the lifeline of Liora's might, to the steady, grounding song of Kaelen that echoed even here, in the deepest dream. Help! The spirit's thought was the rumble of continents shifting, slow and immense. Break the dream. It wasn't asking her to break the chains, it was asking her to break the cycle, to shatter the nightmare so it could finally wake, even to pain, and face the process of true healing. To do that, she would have to channel a force greater than her soothing light. She would have to channel the spirit's own longing for life, focused through her bond. "Kaelen," she cried down the bond. "The song, change it. Don't greet it, call it home." In the dreamscape, Kaelen heard. His steady hum shifted. It became stronger, more imperative. It was no longer a greeting song. It was a summoning howl, the call of an alpha to a lost member of his pack, a command to rise. The spirit trembled. The black chains strained. Liora gathered every image of life, every sensation of love and growth, and fused it with the commanding power of Kaelen's howl. She became a conduit, a focal point. She aimed this combined force, the spirit's own desire, the alpha's command, her healing hope, not at the chains, but at the core of the nightmare itself. She shouted a single, silent word into the fabric of the dream. Awaken. The dreamscape shattered, not with violence, but with a sound like a million panes of glass breaking in reverse, coming together. The bruised sky cracked, revealing the real starry night above. The pulsing, infected earth stilled and solidified into the true, dry dirt of the blight scar. The massive, chained form of the earth spirit blurred, its dream body dissolving. The black chains, having nothing to hold, screamed and turned to smoke, scattered by a wind that hadn't blown in centuries. Liora found herself back in her body, kneeling on the cold stone of the shallow cave, Kaelen's arms around her, his howl still dying on his lips. They were both gasping, drained to their very marrow. For a long moment, nothing happened. Had it worked? Then the ground beneath them shuddered, but it was not the sickly tremor from before. It was a deep, resonant stretch, like a giant stirring after a long sleep. Outside the cave, in the dead heart of the blight scar, a miracle began. Where Liora and Kaelen's feet had touched the earth on their approach, a line of green appeared. Moss, then grass, then wildflowers in a riot of color spread from that line, racing across the barren valley faster than the eye could follow. The cracked earth sealed itself. Bulbs that had lain dormant for centuries erupted into bloom. From the central outcropping, water, clear, cold, and sweet, began to seep, then flow, forming a new stream that cut a silver path through the newborn meadow. The earth spirit did not rise in a physical form, it simply returned. Its consciousness reintegrated with the land. The valley was no longer a scar, it was a heartbeat, strong and steady. Exhausted but euphoric, Liora and Kaelen stumbled from the cave into the newborn dawn light. Had a whole night passed? They stood hand in hand, watching life reclaim its kingdom. The sighing in Leora's soul was gone, replaced by a deep, contented hum, the song of a world made whole. They had faced the memory of stone, and together they had given it its future.
The transformation of the Blight Scar into what the pack now called the Verdant Heart was the talk of the territory. News spread like pollen on the wind, carried by traders, travelers, and the Sylvan network. The Dawnweaver and the Alpha King hadn't just won a battle, they had healed a centuries-old wound in the world itself. Pilgrims came in greater numbers, not just the sick, but the curious, the reverent, and the ambitious. It was this last group that began to whisper a new word, first in the human taverns, then in the Sylvan groves, and finally it reached the ears of Silverhold. Monarchs. Not just alpha and mate, but king and queen of a reborn realm. The notion settled uneasily on Leora's shoulders. She had been a herb woman, then a fugitive, then a weapon, then a healer. The title of queen felt like a crown of thorns, beautiful and binding. Kaelen, too, seemed wary. His rule had always been that of a protector, a first among equals in the pack. The formality of a human-style monarchy felt alien. Yet the need for structure was undeniable. The Ghostwood, the Sylvan marches, and now the Verdant Heart were interconnected, their peoples mingling. Disputes arose over land use, over hunting rights, over the direction of the new settlements springing up around the Dawn Grove. The informal councils between Kaelen, Liora, and Eleron were becoming overwhelmed. "The land has chosen you," Eleron said during one such council, his fingers tracing the grain of the living wood table. "Not just the Moonbound, but the very soil you healed. It responds to your joined will. This is a fact, not an ambition. To ignore it is to let chaos fill the vacuum." Senna, ever practical, nodded. "The humans look for a crown. It is a symbol they understand. Give them a symbol of unity, or they will make their own, and it may not be one that includes us." The pressure built, a subtle but persistent force. Liora felt it in the way pilgrims bowed a little too deeply, in the way human merchants now referred to the royal lands. She saw the considering look in Kaelen's eyes during long silences, the weight of a new kind of duty settling on him. The final catalyst came from an unexpected source, from Theron and Alara. The two children, now fast friends who bridged human and wolf with effortless innocence, had been exploring the newly vibrant Verdant Heart. They returned one afternoon, breathless and solemn, carrying a single extraordinary item. It was a circlet, not of metal but of living material. The base was a pliant silver-gray vine from the Ghostwood. Woven into it were leaves of the Sylvan heart tree, perpetually green. And at its center, nestled like a captured star, was a crystal that had formed in the Dawn Grove. It held a swirling internal light that shifted from gold to silver and back again. "It was just there," Alara said, her eyes wide, "growing on a stone in the middle of the new stream, like the land made it for you." Theron held it out to Liora. "It feels like you, and Father." Liora took the circlet. It was warm. The moment her fingers touched it, she felt a jolt of recognition, an echo of the Earth Spirit's grateful hum, the Moonbound strength, the Sylvan's growth, and her own Sunweaver's light. It was a symbol, yes, but it was also a covenant, a gift from the territory itself. She looked at Kaelen. In his eyes she saw the same realization. The decision was being made for them by the very world they served. "The coronation will not be in a stone hall," Kaelen declared, his voice firm. "It will be in the verdant heart, under the open sky for all who wish to see." The news ignited a frenzy of peaceful activity. Sylvan weavers and pack crafters worked together to create banners and pavilions. Human bakers and brewers from nearby towns brought their finest. It was to be less a formal ceremony and more a ratification of a truth already in motion, the birth of the Dawn Court. The day dawned clear and bright. The verdant heart was a sea of color and life. Thousands gathered, wolves in their proudest forms, Sylvan folk adorned with living flowers, humans in their festival best, and creatures Liora had never seen, shy, furry beings from deep forests, elegant bird folk from the southern cliffs who had heard the song of the healed earth. Liora stood with Kaelen in a simple tent at the edge of the field. She wore a gown the color of twilight, sewn by Sylvan hands, that seemed to shift with her movements. He wore dark leathers edged with silver, the alpha's torque around his neck. The living circlet rested on a pillow of moss between them. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low. "To be bound to you for all to see?" She smiled. "Always. To be called queen, I suppose I must grow into it as I grew into the light." He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "You will be a queen who heals, a queen who tends. It is who you are. The crown just reminds everyone else." The ceremony was led by Eleron and Senna, representing the old magic of land and pack. There were no oaths of fealty to them, but oaths from them. Kaelen swore to protect all who dwelled within the realm's borders, be they fur, leaf, or flesh. Liora swore to nurture the land and its people, to be a light in darkness and a balm for wounds. Then together they spoke the vow that would echo through history. "We swear to rule not as masters over subjects, but as stewards for the future. Our bond is our strength, and from that strength we offer shelter, justice, and growth to all who call this land home." Eleron lifted the living circlet. As he did, every Sylvan present began a low, harmonious hum. Senna placed a hand on Kaelen's shoulder, and a soft, collective howl rose from the pack. Not a cry of wildness, but a song of allegiance. The combined sounds wove around the circlet, charging it further. Eleron did not place it on Liora's head alone. He held it above them both. "By the consent of the land, the pack, and the people," his voice rang out, "I crown you not as separate rulers, but as one sovereign heart, Kaelen and Liora, the moon-crowned king and the dawn-crowned queen. Long may your dawn shine." He lowered the circlet. It did not rest on one head, but seemed to hover between them for a moment before dividing into two perfect complementary halves. A band of silver vine and moon-pale crystal settled on Kaelen's brow. A band of gold-woven vine and sun-bright crystal settled on Liora's. They were separate, but when they stood side by side, the crystals pulsed in perfect unison. A roar of approval shook the ground, howls, song, and human cheers blending into one sound of pure acceptance. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days, but for Liora and Kaelen, the true meaning of their coronation came that first night, after the feasting had quieted. They walked alone in the verdant heart, under the stars. "It is done," Kaelen said, his fingers laced with hers. The twin crowns on their brows glowed softly. "No," she corrected gently, looking out over the sleeping, peaceful camp, at the new stream glittering under the moon. "It is just begun. The easy part is over. Now comes the work of building a realm that deserves this faith." He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. The crowns touched and a soft chime resonated between them. In that moment, Liora felt no fear of the title. The crown was not a weight, but a connection to the land, to the people, and most deeply to the man whose soul was now eternally twined with hers. She was not just a queen. She was the dawn, and he was her steady moon, and their reign would be the long, gentle day in between.
The Dawn Court's first summer was a season of golden contentment. The new capital, a sprawling, open settlement named Havenfall, grew organically between the Ghostwood and the Verdant Heart. Its architecture was a beautiful hybrid: sturdy timber frames from human craft, living, growing walls encouraged by the Sylvan, and den-like communal spaces favored by the pack. It was a noisy, messy, vibrant testament to unity. Liora and Kaelen ruled from a pavilion at Havenfall's heart, their throne a great, moss-covered stone that had risen of its own accord in the center of the town square. Justice was dispensed there, disputes settled, and blessings given. Liora's healing touch became a daily ritual, and she began to train others, human, Sylvan, and wolf, who showed an aptitude for the healing arts, channeling their gifts through the principles of balance she embodied. Yet, in the deep stillness of night, when the bond between her and Kaelen was a quiet hum, a new whisper began, not from the land, which was now robust and joyful, but from elsewhere. It came on the edge of sleep, a faint, sibilant call that was almost a melody. It spoke of cool, dark places, of immense pressure and ancient peace. It spoke of forgotten halls and a loneliness as deep as an ocean trench. It didn't use words, but conveyed a profound sense of waiting. At first, Liora thought it a lingering echo from her communion with the Earth Spirit, but this was different. The Earth Spirit's voice had been stone and root. This was brine and pearl and abyssal current. She mentioned it to Kaelen one morning as they watched the mist rise off the Verdant Heart. "Do you hear it? A call, like a song from under the world." He listened, his senses stretching through their bond and out into the territory. He frowned. "I hear nothing, but the bond feels stretched, tense in a direction." He pointed west, beyond the Ghostwood, beyond even the Sylvan marches, toward the distant, jagged line of the Iron Sea coast. There, the mystery lingered, an itch they couldn't scratch. Then the messengers arrived. They came at twilight, emerging from the forest not on foot, but slithering on powerful, scaled tails. Their upper bodies were humanoid, with skin the color of stormy sea foam and hair like drifting kelp. Their eyes were large, luminescent, and entirely black. Sea folk, merkin, creatures of legend. The Havenfall guards tensed, but the merkin emissary who introduced herself as Neri raised a webbed hand in a placating gesture. She carried a conch shell etched with spirals. "We seek the dawn-crowned." Her voice was like waves over gravel, beautiful and rough. The singer of the deep has heard the new song of the land. She has felt the healing of the stone, and she has a request. Brought before the mossy throne, the merkin emissary who introduced herself as Neri told a troubling tale. "Our home, the sunken city of Kaelen, is sick. A creeping gray malaise like the one your land knew weakens our coral spires. It silences our singing crystals. Our young are born listless. Our singer, the ancient one who harmonizes the city's heart, is fading. She says the sickness comes not from the sea, but through it, from a crack in the world's floor, far to the west, in the trench of mourning. She says the same shadow that touched your land drips into our depths." Neri's luminous eyes fixed on Liora's crown. The singer dreams of a light that healed the earth, a dawn that can penetrate even the eternal night of the deep. She begs the Dawnweaver's aid. A plea from the sea. the whisper given form. Liora felt the rightness of it and the immense danger. She was a creature of sun and soil. The lightless, crushing depths were an alien realm. The pressure would kill a land dweller, even with magic, Kaelen immediately said, his protective instinct flaring. "We have ways," Neri said. "We have the breath of the abyss, a kelp that transforms gill and strengthens flesh for a time. But the journey is long, and the trench, it is a place of forgotten terrors. The singer believes only the balanced light, the union of sun and moon, can seal the crack and purify the seepage." Illyrian, who had been summoned, nodded slowly. "The realms are connected, the earth, the forests, the seas. A poison in the deep will eventually rise. We sealed a wound on the land, now the sea asks for the same." The weight of the request was immense. To leave their nascent kingdom, to venture into a lethal, unknown world. Liora looked at Kaelen. In the bond, she felt not just his fear for her, but his understanding of the duty. A true steward protected all the realm, even the parts unseen. "We will come," Liora said, her voice firm, "but not as supplicants, as allies. We will need to understand the nature of this crack. We will need to know what we face." Neri bowed deeply, relief in every movement. "The singer will share all she sees. We will prepare the breath. You will have the gratitude of the waves, forever." Preparations were swift and surreal. The breath of the abyss was a thick, iridescent kelp that, when consumed, made the lungs burn and then go dormant, while granting temporary gill slits on the neck and a profound resistance to pressure. Senna and Illyrian worked together to enchant amulets, small stones from the dawn grove set in nets of Sylvan vine, to provide a bubble of familiar magic around them. Saying goodbye to Theron and Ilara was the hardest part. They were to stay with Senna and the full might of the pack and Sylvan guard. "You're going to help the fish people?" Ilara asked, her lower lip trembling. "To help keep our home safe, even from things far away," Liora explained, kneeling to hug her tightly. Theron, trying to be brave like his father, nodded. "We will guard Havenfall. Be careful, Mother. The deep dark is different." The journey to the coast was a week of hard travel. At a secluded, rocky cove, Neri and a dozen other merkin awaited. The sight of the endless, gray, churning iron sea filled Liora with a primal awe and dread. "The transformation will last 3 turns of the moon in the deep," Neri explained, handing each of them a length of the glowing kelp. "Eat it now." The kelp tasted of salt and an eerie, electric life. It moved in their mouths. Moments later, agony seized their chests as their lungs adapted. Liora gasped, feeling slits open on the sides of her neck, pulling oxygen directly from the air. Her skin felt tighter, tougher. With final, longing looks at the sunlit world, they waded into the surf. The merkin surrounded them, their powerful tails churning the water. As the waves closed over their heads, Liora expected panic, but the breath of the abyss worked. She breathed the cold seawater easily. The pressure was a comforting embrace, not a crushing force. The amulets at their chests glowed, creating a sphere of fresh, light air around them. They descended into a world of fading blue, then indigo, then black. The merkin carried bioluminescent orbs that lit up a nightmare wonderland. Forests of whip-thin, glowing coral, schools of fish like living jewels, mountainsides rising from the abyssal plain, dotted with caves that breathed warm, mineral-rich water. For days they traveled, the landscape growing more alien and grand. They passed the ruins of ancient drowned cities, not merkin, but of a blocky, geometric race long gone. They saw creatures of pure light and others that were little more than toothy mouths attached to gelatinous blobs. Finally, they reached Kaelen. It took Liora's breath away, even in the water.
towers of living coral sculpted into fluid, beautiful forms, pulsed with soft internal light. Merkin flitted between them, their songs a constant beautiful vibration in the water. But Neri was right. A gray patina, like lichen of death, clung to the bases of the towers. The songs had a mournful, strained quality. In the city's heart, in a cavern lined with singing crystals that hummed a desperate, discordant note, they met the singer. She was ancient, her tail scales faded, her face a map of wisdom and sorrow. She was not Merkin, but something older, a being part octopus, part woman, with eyes that held the light of drowned stars. Her voice resonated directly in their minds. Dawnweaver, Moon King, you answered the whisper. The crack in the trench of mourning, it weeps a shadow that is not of this world. It is a bleed from a place between places. It withers life because it is anti-life. Your joined light, it is creation itself. You must seal the wound. Show us, Kaelen's thought responded, his mental voice strong and clear in the link the singer established. The singer extended a tendril, touching their amulets.
The guardians of the crack did not attack with physical force. They attacked with dissonance. As Liora and Kaelen approached, a wave of psychic static hit them, a scream of nullity that sought to unravel thought, memory, and the very cohesion of their souls. It was the sound of the void the Shadowstone had represented, amplified 1,000-fold. Leora's mind reeled. She forgot her name, saw Alara's face blur, felt the bond with Kaelen stretch and thin. Beside her, Kaelen snarled, a bubble of rage in the water, fighting the erasure with pure animal will. The light! His thought was a guttural command in the dissolving chaos. Desperate, Liora clawed her way back to her center. She couldn't think of grand healing or creation. She thought of one thing, a single, steadfast point of warmth in an infinite cold. The memory of the morning sun on her face in her herb garden. A simple, undeniable fact of being. That memory ignited. A pinprick of gold appeared in the crushing black, centered on her chest. It was small, but it was real. A dissonance flinched back from it. Kaelen saw her light hold, and he anchored himself to it. He drew not from the moon, but from the reflection of the sun, the moon's constant, loyal witness to the light. A cool silver radiance joined her gold, not fighting the dark, but defining a space within it. Their combined glow pushed back the psychic assault, creating a fragile bubble of sanity in the maddening water. The formless guardians swirled around this bubble, hateful and confused, unable to penetrate the joined light of creation and witness. But they couldn't hold a shield forever. They had to reach the crack. Forward, Kaelen urged. We take the light to the wound. Swimming against the torrent of wrongness pouring from the rift was like swimming upstream in liquid lead. Every inch was a battle of will. The guardians pressed in, their mere presence leaching the warmth from their light. Liora felt the breath of the abyss straining in her veins, the transformation nearing its limit. They were running out of time, air, and strength. Finally, they hovered before the jagged tear. It was not rock, but a rip in the fabric of the seafloor, edges flickering with impossible colors that hurt to look at. The gray seepage oozed from its heart. Looking into it was like looking into the concept of nothingness. How do we seal nothing? Leora's despair leaked through the bond. Kaelen had no answer. Their light pushed against the seepage, but it was like trying to dam a river with a net. The anti-life substance simply flowed around the strands of their power. Then, Liora remembered the Earth Spirit. It hadn't been about fighting the chains, but about changing the dream. This crack was a nightmare in the world's flesh. They couldn't fight the nothingness. They had to give it something to be. She looked at Kaelen, their faces close in the glowing bubble. She poured her love for him, for their children, for their pack, for their sunlit world, down the bond. Not as a shield, but as an offering. He met it with his own, his devotion, his strength, his unwavering loyalty. Together, they crafted from their joined essences a single perfect idea, connection, the antithesis of the void's isolation. They didn't project this idea at the crack, they let it fill their shared light, changing its nature. Their glow softened, becoming less a barrier and more a invitation, a memory of wholeness. They swam into the seepage. Agony. It was the cold of the grave, the silence of extinction. It ate at their light, at their very selves. But they didn't fight it. They endured it, and within their endured connection, they held fast to their crafted idea. The gray seepage, which consumed all life and magic, encountered something it had no reference for, a light that was not just energy, but meaning, a light that was a relationship. It hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, Liora and Kaelen pushed their joined consciousness, wrapped in the idea of connection, into the heart of the crack itself, into the bleeding edge between worlds. They did not see another realm, they saw the lack of one, a sterile, infinite gray. And in that gray they felt a presence, vast, lonely, and hungry, not malicious, but empty. It was the consciousness of the between place, and it was drawn to the vibrancy of their world like a moth to a flame, its touch causing the cancerous bleed. They couldn't destroy it. It was a fundamental part of existence, the canvas between paintings. But they could negotiate. Through their light, through the idea of connection, they showed it not just the life of their world, but the cost of its hunger. They showed it the dying coral, the listless merkin young, the blighted land it had previously touched. They showed it the pain its unconscious craving caused. And then they showed it an alternative. They showed it the beauty of its own stillness, the peace of the void. They offered it a relationship of respectful distance instead of a parasitic touch, a treaty of borders. The vast presence pondered. Its loneliness was ancient. The concept of a connection that did not consume was novel. Through the crack, it had only ever tasted consumption. Slowly, reluctantly, the pressure of its hunger lessened. The gray seepage slowed, then stopped. The flickering edges of the crack began to still. But a wound this old could not simply be wished shut. It needed a suture made of something that could exist in both worlds. Liora knew what it was. She looked at the living crowns on their brows, the vines from the Ghostwood and Sylvan marches, the crystals from the Dawn Grove, symbols of a healed land, of connection forged. Wordlessly, she removed her crown. Kaelen, understanding, removed his. In the water, they brought the two halves together. As they touched, the crowns fused back into the original, complete circlet. With a final, combined push of their will, they placed the living circlet over the crack. The vines lengthened, digging into the seafloor on either side of the rift. The crystals blazed with a light that was both solar and lunar, earthly and magical. The circlet became a bridge, a seal, and a beacon. It didn't just close the wound, it defined the boundary, a beautiful, luminous lock on the door between worlds. The vast presence in the gray watched, then with a sense of something like gratitude, curiosity, it receded. The crack sealed fully, leaving only the circlet, glowing with a soft, permanent light embedded in the ocean floor, a new wonder in the deep, the abyssal crown. The formless guardians, bereft of their source, dissipated like smoke in a current. Exhaustion, total and complete, overwhelmed them. The breath of the abyss was failing, their gills stung, their lungs ached to breathe air. The merkin, who had watched the miracle in awe, surged forward, catching them as they began to sink. The return to the surface was a blur.
They broke into the blinding, shocking air of the world with ragged gasps, the merkin supporting them in the choppy cove waters. The amulets cracked and fell away, their magic spent. Collapsing on the rocky shore, coughing up seawater, Liora looked at Kaelen. He was pale, drained, but his eyes held hers. They had faced the absolute dark and not just survived, but made a pact with it. Neri emerged beside them, her luminescent eyes wide with reverence. The singer says the gray retreats. The crystals of Aquilon sing clear again. You have saved the deep. The sea will never forget. As they lay there, shivering in the sun they had nearly forgotten, Liora knew their journey had changed more than the sea. They had carried their dawn into the heart of nothing and left a star behind. Their reign was no longer just over land and forest. They were the guardians of the boundaries of reality itself.
The return to Havenfall was triumphant, but Liora carried a deep, silent exhaustion that not even the sun could warm. The abyss had left its mark. In the quiet moments, she could still feel the crushing pressure, the hunger of the void, the eerie silence of the between place. It echoed in her dreams, not as nightmares, but as vast, gray landscapes, where a single glowing circlet was the only point of reference. Kaelen sensed it through the bond, a cold spot in her spirit that his presence could soothe but not erase. He too bore the weight, but his was the grim resolve of a soldier who has stared into an abyss and held the line. His energy went into strengthening Havenfall's defenses, integrating the loyal merkin who now regularly visited the coast, establishing a new outpost called Tidewatch. Their crowns, lost to the deep, were not replaced. The people saw it not as a loss, but as a sacrifice mythologized in song. The monarchs who gave their crown to seal the world's wound. Liora didn't feel like a myth. She felt hollowed out. The physical realm continued to flourish. Trade routes solidified, the first mixed-blood children of human and Sylvan, human and pack were born, celebrated as symbols of the new age. Ilara and Theron, on the cusp of adolescence, thrived as the realm's beloved prince and princess, their bond a mirror of their parents. Yet a subtle wrongness persisted. It wasn't in the land or the people, it was in Liora. Her Sunweaver magic, once a vibrant river, now felt thin, overstretched. Healing a simple cut took concentration. The joyful, effortless connection to growing things was muted, as if she was listening to a song through thick glass. "You gave a piece of yourself to the deep," Senna told her bluntly one afternoon in the healer's pavilion. "Not just power, a piece of your essence, the core of what makes a Sunweaver. The crown was a focus, but the sacrifice was yours." "Can it grow back?" Liora asked, the question sounding pathetic to her own ears. Senna's aged face was compassionate but honest. "I do not know. No one has ever done what you did. You are navigating uncharted depths of your own soul." The helplessness was a new kind of torment. She was the Dawnweaver, the healer queen, and she was fading. The crisis came with the first autumn storm. A ferocious gale swept in from the Iron Sea, worse than any in memory. It wasn't natural. The wind carried a sharp, metallic scent and a psychic whisper of fury. It tore at Havenfall's living roofs, uprooted young trees in the verdant heart, and sent waves of disorienting fear through the pack. At the peak of the storm, a bolt of lightning, not white, but a sickly, bruised purple, struck the central moss throne in the square, splitting it in two. As the thunder rolled, a figure coalesced from the raging rain and shadows in the cleft of the stone. It was a man, or the echo of one. He was tall, clad in robes of extinct constellations, his hair a flowing silver, his eyes twin pools of swirling nebula. Power radiated from him, ancient and immense, but it was a power of endings, of cold, dead stars. He looked at Liora, who stood with Kaelen in the doorway of their pavilion, and his voice was the crackle of cosmic ice. "Little Ember, you who sealed my doorway, you who bargained with the hungry gray and gave it a trinket to placate it.
Kaelen stepped in front of Liora, a growl building in his chest. "Name yourself." The being smiled, a cold stretching of light. "I have had many names. The first races called me the Final Note. You may call me Oblivion. I am a custodian of the spaces between. The crack you sealed was a back door, clumsy and crude. The hungry gray is a simple beast. I am its keeper, and you have interfered with my charge." Leora's blood ran cold. The vast, lonely presence in the gray, it had a keeper, and they had angered him. The bleed was poisoning worlds. Liora pushed past Kaelen, finding her voice. "We stopped the harm." "Harm?" Oblivion laughed, and the sound froze the rain in mid-air around him. "You impose your mortal concepts of harm on cosmic processes. The bleed was an equilibrium, a slow, gentle entropy. You have staunched it, yes, but in doing so, you have drawn attention, my attention, and the hungry gray now pines for the light you showed it. It is becoming restless, disorderly." He took a step forward, and the very light of the oil lamps in the pavilion guttered. "Your light is a guttering spark. You spent your essence in the deep. There is barely enough left to be worth the erasing. This will be mercifully quick." He raised a hand. Darkness gathered, not the shadow of night, but the absolute dark of a place before stars. In that moment, with her mate in agony and her power a dim echo, Liora understood. She couldn't fight him with the light of creation. That light was almost gone. But she had something else, something she had learned in the abyss. She had learned to connect to the alien, to the hungry, to the void itself. She stopped trying to push her light out. Instead, she turned inward, to the cold, hollow place the abyss had left in her soul. She didn't try to fill it, she opened it. She reached out with her emptiness, not her light, and touched the edge of Oblivion's gathering power. The custodian of endings paused, curious. "What is this? You offer your own negation? A wise, if futile, surrender." "Not surrender," Liora gasped, the strain immense. "An invitation." She used the bond, not as a conduit of power, but as a template. The bond with Kaelen was a connection between opposites that created something greater. She took the hollow in her soul, the echo of the hungry gray's loneliness, and she offered it to Oblivion's vast, cold isolation. She showed him not the joy of connection, but the truth of it, the shared burden, the responsibility, the endless work. She showed him the weight Kaelen carried as alpha, the weariness she felt as healer. She showed him that to be connected was to be vulnerable, to be tired, to be inconvenienced. "You guard the emptiness to keep it pure," she thought at him, pouring the concept down the strange link she had forged. "But isolation is its own kind of corruption. You are alone with your charge. What if it becomes more than you can handle? Who shares your burden?" Oblivion's cosmic fury faltered. The concept was alien to him. Custodians were singular, eternal, alone. "We did not destroy your equilibrium," Liora pressed, her strain fading fast. "We gave it a fence, a definition. We gave the hungry gray a star to look at, not to consume. That is not disorder. That is a more stable boundary, one that requires guardians on both sides." She poured the last of her awareness into the final image, not her and Kaelen as threats, but as neighbors, guardians of the vibrant side of the fence, and him, Oblivion, as the guardian of the quiet side, a shared duty across a defined border. The darkness hovering over Oblivion's hand dissipated, the agonizing pull on her bond with Kaelen ceased, leaving them both trembling but intact. The cosmic being stared at her, his nebula eyes swirling slowly. For an eon in a second he was silent. "Architecture," he murmured, the word strange on his lips. "A shared boundary." He looked from Liora to Kaelen, who was struggling to his feet, a protective snarl still on his lips. "You propose an alliance with me." Understanding," Liora corrected, swaying.
We tend our realm, you tend the quiet, and we respect the fence." Oblivion considered. The storm around them began to calm. The unnatural purple tint faded from the sky. The variable persists, but contained, defined. Perhaps a contained variable is not a contaminant, but a feature, a point of interest. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Very well, little Ember. We shall have an understanding. Tend your bright, noisy realm, keep your fence in good repair, and I will keep the gray from yearning too loudly." He took a step back, his form beginning to dissolve into starlight and shadow. "Do not make me regret this architecture." And he was gone. The storm was just a storm. The rain was just rain. Liora collapsed. Kaelen caught her, holding her close, his body trembling as much as hers. The bond between them was whole, but it felt different, touched by something cold and ancient, but also stronger, as if tested in a forge beyond reality. They had faced not a monster, but a principle, and they hadn't defeated it. They made a deal with it.
Recovery was a slow, quiet process. The encounter with Oblivion left no physical mark, but a psychic scar on the realm itself. The people of Havenfall spoke of the star storm in hushed tones, a myth that had touched their doorstep. The split moss throne was left as it was, a permanent reminder. Leora's strength returned, but her Sunweaver magic did not. It remained a quiet, diminished stream. She could still heal, but it was work now, not joy. The effortless communion with growing things was a memory. Senna called it soul fatigue, a burnout of the spiritual core. She might never fully recover. Kaelen was different too. The bond was secure, but his watchfulness had a new cosmic dimension. He often looked at the stars not with wonder, but with assessment, as if checking the fences of reality. His focus turned inward, fortifying Havenfall, strengthening the pack's mental disciplines, preparing for threats that were no longer just of this world. The realm, oblivious to the true nature of the threat, continued to prosper, but a subtle shift occurred. The wild, unchecked celebration of the early days matured into a more purposeful, grateful industry. They had been reminded that their peace was not a default state, but a careful construction. Ilara, now a keen-eyed girl of 13, noticed the change in her mother most of all. One evening, she found Liora in the healing pavilion staring at a wilting moonflower that refused to respond to her touch. "It's okay, Mama," her daughter said softly, placing her hand over her mother's. "You don't have to fix everything." Liora looked at her daughter, seeing not a child, but a young woman with her grandmother's perceptive eyes. "What if fixing things is who I was?" "Maybe who you were is what got us here," Ilara said wisely, "but who you are is what keeps us safe. You're the queen who made a deal with a star god to save father. That's more important than making a flower bloom." Her daughter's words were a balm. Liora realized she had been mourning the loss of a tool, not her purpose. Her purpose had evolved. She was no longer just the healer. She was the diplomat of the dawn, the keeper of the terrible pact. This realization birthed a new project. With Kaelen and Illyrian, they conceived of the Sentinel Grove. In the exact center of the realm, at the convergence of the Ghostwood, the Verdant Heart, and the Sylvan Marches, they planted a circle of 9 trees. Each was a hybrid, an oak grafted with Sylvan heartwood, its roots whispered to by pack shamans. In the center, they placed a shard of the broken moss throne. This grove was not a place of healing or celebration. It was a ward, a focal point for the understanding with Oblivion, a piece of the fence.
Once a month, under the new moon, the time of deepest quiet, Liora and Kaelen would go there. They wouldn't use flashy magic, they would simply sit, their joined presence a gentle reaffirmation of their side of the boundary, a soft hum of "we are here" into the cosmos. It was during one of these vigils that Theron, now a lanky youth who could shift as easily as breathing, approached them with a scout. "Father, mother, riders from the far eastern plains, the Horse Lord clans, they've heard everything. The Healed Land, the Sea Alliance, the Star Storm. They request an audience." The world was knocking not with swords but with curiosity and caution. Their realm was becoming a known entity, a strange, powerful beacon in a world used to simpler divisions. Kaelen looked at Liora. The bond hummed with weary resolve, but also a spark of the old, defiant hope. He said, "We built a fence to keep a cosmic horror at bay. It seems we also built a gate. Shall we see who comes calling?" Liora took his hand. Her light was dim, but her will was iron. She looked at the Sentinel Grove, then back toward the lights of Havenfall, where their children waited. "We will see them. We will be cautious, but we will not hide. The dawn might be quieter now, it still shines." The arrival of the Horse Lord emissaries marked the true beginning of the Dawn Court's diplomatic era. Liora, drawing on a patience she didn't know she had, found her new strength was not in laying hands, but in reading hearts, in finding the common thread of need beneath the bluster of foreign chiefs. She learned that the fading of her explosive Sunweaver magic had made space for a deeper, subtler magic, the magic of perception, of diplomacy, of rule. Kaelen, with his preternatural senses and aura of formidable power, was the shield. She had become the compass. One night, a year after the starstorm, Liora stood on the balcony of their tower in Havenfall. Below, the realm slept peacefully. Kaelen came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her. "You are quiet tonight," he murmured. "I was thinking about the fence," she said, leaning back into him. "We built it to keep something out, but it also defines what we are inside. It gives us shape, a purpose." He nuzzled her hair. "We are the gardeners of the bright side. Tending is different than fighting. It is slower. It has quieter victories." She turned in his arms to face him. In the moonlight, his face was both familiar and eternally wondrous. The bond between them was a deep, still river, having weathered earthquakes and cosmic tides. "I miss the sun sometimes," she admitted, "the way it used to sing in me." He kissed her forehead where her crown had once rested. "You are my sun, Liora. Whether you blaze or glow, you are the constant, my dawn." In his words, she found the final acceptance. She was not the girl who blazed with golden light to save a cub. She was the queen who held the line against the dark with quiet resolve. She was the architect of boundaries, the weaver of understandings. Her light had not vanished, it had been tempered, refined, woven into the very fabric of the realm she helped build. It was enough, more than enough. It was her forever.
10 years passed like the turning of gentle pages. Havenfall was no longer a settlement, it was a true city, a marvel of the age. Towers of stone and living wood reached for the sky, connected by bridges where wolves, humans, and Sylvan mingled. The Dawn Academy, founded by Liora and Senna, taught healing, history, and the careful ethics of power to students of all races. The harbor at Tidewatch bustled with merkin traders bringing pearls and deep-sea knowledge. The fence held. The Sentinel Grove thrived, its trees tall and serene. There were no more cosmic incursions. Oblivion kept his word. The hungry gray was quiet. Liora's hair, once dark, was now streaked with elegant silver, matching the traces at Kaelen's temples.
Her Sunweaver magic never returned to its former glory, but it had settled into a deep, resonant warmth. She could no longer heal a field with a thought, but her touch could ease a dying elder's passage with profound peace. Her power was in her presence, in her wise counsel, in the stability she radiated. Liora, at 23, was the realm's chief diplomat, her mind sharp, her heart just, inheriting her mother's compassion and her father's strategic mind. Theron, the same age, was the master of the Pack Scouts and Kaelen's heir apparent in all but name, his bond with Liora as close as siblings, a bedrock of the next generation. The story of the herb woman and the wolf cub was a beloved legend told to children. The truth of the trials, the abyss, the pact with a cosmic custodian was known only to a few. The realm built its peace on the foundation of those unsung battles. On a morning bright with the gentle gold of a mature autumn, Liora walked alone in the private garden behind the royal pavilion. It was a small, simple space, her sanctuary. Here she grew herbs again, common ones, for tea and seasoning. The act of tending them, feeling the soil, was a meditation. Kaelen found her there, as he often did. He moved with a predator's grace that time had not diminished, only polished. He sat on a stone bench beside the patch of sunshine where she knelt. "The Horse Lord clans have formally accepted the trade accord," he said, his voice a low rumble of contentment. "Their emissary says the Eastern Plains are the most stable they've been in generations. They credit the Dawn influence." She smiled, brushing soil from her hands. "We sent them seeds and healers, not soldiers. Stability grows from roots, not from fear." He watched her, his gold-flecked eyes soft. "You have built a world, my love, a real one." She sat back on her heels, looking at her garden, then up at the sky. "We built a garden inside a fence, and we convinced the wildness outside to respect the wall." She reached out, and he took her hand. The bond was a quiet, eternal hum. "It is a good life, Kaelen. A quiet dawn after a long, harrowing night." "The quiet is the hardest-won victory," he said. They sat in comfortable silence, two monarchs in an herb garden, their crowns long gone but their authority woven into the peaceful air around them. A messenger, a young wolf in human form, approached hesitantly. "My king, my queen, forgive the intrusion. A visitor at the gate. He insists he has an appointment with the keepers of the fence. He gave no name, but he left this." The youth held out a single, perfect feather. It glowed with a soft, shifting light, dawn pink to midday gold. The phoenix pinion. Liora and Kaelen exchanged a profound shock. Eleran said it was a one-time focus, consumed in their bonding, yet here it was. "Where is he?" Kaelen asked, his voice tense. "He's in the Sentinel Grove, sire. He just appeared there." They went, not with guards, but alone. This was a matter for the architects. In the center of the Sentinel Grove, where the shard of the moss throne lay, stood a man. He was neither old nor young, dressed in simple traveler's clothes, but his eyes held the gentle, devastating wisdom of something that had seen civilizations burn and rebirth. He held the other half of the phoenix pinion. "Hello again," he said. His voice was kind, but carried the weight of epics. "You have done well, far better than I hoped when I guided the Sylvan to bring me my feather." You are the phoenix?" Liora breathed. "A fragment, a memory of one, a custodian of beginnings, as your friend Oblivion is a custodian of endings. You have balanced the scales beautifully. The fence is elegant. Your realm is a masterpiece of fragile, defiant life." "Why are you here?" Kaelen asked, stepping slightly in front of Liora, a habit that would never die. "To deliver a message and an offering," the phoenix said. "The message is this: the balance you have struck is observed by others.
Your realm is now a fixed point in the great tapestry. It will attract attention, both good and ill, for as long as it stands." Leora's heart clenched. More attention? More threats? "The offering," the phoenix continued, smiling gently, "is this." He held out the two halves of the pinion. "You spent your dawn light in the deep, Queen Liora. You gave it freely to save others. That is the highest use of such a gift. But a well that gives freely should not be left dry." He brought the feather halves together. They fused not back into a feather, but into a small, glowing seed. He knelt and pressed it into the soil at the base of the central sentinel tree. "This is not a return of what you lost. That sacrifice is part of you now, and it made you who you are. This is a potential for what comes next, for your heir or for an heir of your spirit. When the time is right and a worthy heart stands here, the seed of the second dawn will awaken." He stood, brushing the soil from his hands. "My work is done. The cycle is secured. Tend your garden, keepers of the fence. Your quiet dawn is the prologue to an age." He began to fade like morning mist in the sun. "Wait," Liora called. "Will we see you again?" The phoenix's kind, ancient eyes met hers. "I am always there, in the first breath after darkness, in the spark of a new idea. You need not see me to know I am with you. Farewell." And he was gone. Liora and Kaelen stood in the grove, staring at the spot of soil where the seed was buried. A new mystery, a new promise. Kaelen took her hand. A second dawn. Liora looked from the seed to her mate, to the city visible through the trees, to the whole humming, living realm they had built with love and sacrifice and terrifying pacts. She smiled, a true, sun-deep smile that reached her eyes for the first time in years. "The first one was enough work for a lifetime," she said. "Let the next generation worry about the second. We have a garden to tend." And hand in hand, the moon-crowned king and the dawn-crowned queen walked out of the sentinel grove, back towards their city, their people, their quiet, hard-won, magnificent dawn.